managing does take you away a lot from that sort of circle of the director where, you really are for a very brief moment in time, and it passes. And by the time they get into production, it's like the location scout is who? But there's a very brief moment in time where you really contribute to someone's vision, and most of the time they're very appreciative of that effort and work. And I think that, like I said, it's not something that stays consistent necessarily through the whole experience of the movie, but it's I think once you kind of understand that you get this really incredible moment in time to be part of something really special. And just the nature of our business makes priorities really compartmental, meaning scouting is a priority for
locations. Go to 2.
Maida on 2.
Hi, this is Maida Morgan, location manager, and you're listening to Locations on 2.
This is Dodd Vickers, your host for Locations on 2, the podcast that takes you around the world and behind the scenes with location managers working in all facets of the entertainment industry. Locations on 2 is brought to you by the Location Managers Guild International. The LMGI is a global organization of location professionals working in film, television, and the commercial industries. You can find out more and visit them online by going to locationmanagers.org. On this episode of the podcast, I'm joined by one of my early mentors in the industry, Maida Morgan. A 30-year veteran of the location industry, Maida gave me my first opportunity to jump into film production. A few of the projects she's worked on would include Fried Green Tomatoes, Armageddon, Remember the Titans, Prisoners, Internship, Jumanji, Goosebumps, Lady and the Tramp, and Jungle Cruise. I'm very excited to have somebody else with me on the back channel where the real work gets done on set. Location manager, Maida Morgan. Locations on 2. Maida, there was a great profile of you in Compass magazine recently that I was reading and really enjoyed it because even though I know you pretty well, there was a lot in there I didn't know about you. And one thing I didn't know was that you knew the origin of the name for the Honey Wagon. What is the origin?
Did I talk about the Honey Wagon?
Yeah, part of it was something along the lines of you had learned a lot, including the origin of the name.
Oh, yeah. Well, that back in the day before there were sewer systems in towns and people hired companies to come by and clean out their outhouses or septic systems.
Mm-hmm.
They were done in open pickups or open wagons. They would go through the towns and go through the neighborhoods cleaning out everybody's cisterns. The way they kept the smell down was they poured honey over the top of every...
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it became known as the Honey Wagon.
Oh, that's funny because after I saw that, I went and tried to look it up, and everything that I found was about the color, the honey color of the stuff that was being pumped out. And then I thought of the old saying, you catch more flies with honey. And I said, I wonder if that's really what it is.
No, I mean, the story that was told to me by a honey wagon driver in my early days was that honey was used as a air freshener. For open air honey pumper services, but they weren't pumper services. It was literally guys with shovels.
Yeah,
yeah.
Nobody wants that job anymore. So you grew up in Mississippi, right?
Uh-huh.
Tell me a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, what your family was doing, and what your life growing up before you got into the business was like.
Well, I grew up in Carrollton, Mississippi, which is a small town in the north central area of the state, which sits on the bluffs of the Delta. And the town was founded in the 1820s when before the Delta had levees. People didn't live in the Delta. They lived up in the bluff areas because of the swampiness. Mm-hmm. So Carrollton was founded as a Delta town, but it technically was in the first hill areas of the state. So most of the structures in the town were built between 1820 and 1850. And it was a small town. There were I think it was about 700 people when I was growing up, and the population now is about 400. But it's the county seat, and it's kind of like an idyllic movie set. Even today, I've been asked many times over the years to go find a town that I go, oh, well, that's where I grew up. But it was a very Tom Sawyer kind of life. I had a pony, and I would get on my pony with my German Shepherd and ride all over the town, which most of the town kind of interspersed between cotton fields and hay fields and cattle farms, and just one little strip of town around a courthouse. So it was definitely kind of like a country town. But there were lots of big antebellum houses, and there was a big courthouse, and there were a strip of stores. I think there was like 4 grocery stores running through the middle of town. And it was the kind of place on a Saturday night where people literally loaded up in the car or loaded up their wagons and came to the town square and had fun. Very, very throwback.
It's funny how we're seeing kind of a resurgence of that in a lot of the small towns around here. In Monroe, when I lived in Monroe, every first Friday they had a big, close off the streets and everybody gets together. And we were in Canton filming last night, and that was one of the challenges we had, where they were doing the same thing. It's kind of nice to see that, even in spite, I know it's not quite the same with what we're dealing with COVID right now, but it's really nice to see kind of that resurgence of the little town and people really wanting to get together and getting away from the going to the mall kind of feel that we had years ago.
It definitely brings a sense of community, and it's all outdoors and very active, like kids run and play. And so I had a pony. I didn't have a bicycle or anything. I had a little Shetland pony named Polly. And Polly and my German Shepherd Gus were sort of my constant companions. And my pony stayed at my grandmother's house, or she'd stay wherever anybody needed grass eaten, because she ate all the time. And that's how I kind of got into the film business. I rode my pony without a saddle and bareback, and there were people quite concerned in town that a little 4 or 5 year old kid would just go running through the middle of town bareback on a pony with a dog. So more out of I think trying to calm people down, my parents bought me a saddle and told me that I could no longer ride my pony without a saddle. And I was too small to saddle the pony by myself. So I would go and sit down and talk to my horse every day. And this guy came up and started talking to me, and I told him that, and I would walk along the edge of a fence and put the bridle on my horse and just sit on my pony inside the fence with the bridle. And I came home one day, and the pony was saddled, and there was a big horse beside it saddled, and the guy said, I'll ride with you. And so we began to ride a couple of times a week, and it was Steve McQueen.
I just love that.
They were making a movie next door to my grandmother's house, and his Winnebago was literally parked beside my grandmother's barn, and he had seen me and he heard the story, and so one of the big complaints that had come about me and the pony was that I would run through the shots, because I would come out the side of the barn, and if they were filming, a good part of the movie took place at that house and that property. So at any given time, I could be on the edge of frame or right in the middle of frame, and so at any time I would come out of the barn on my pony and blow through the frame. And I just kind of became known to the film group, the little kid with the pony. Where is she? Make sure you got her locked up. And then when I quit showing up, and they realized that my parents had, were trying to be respectful to them, he came over and, he didn't want me not to ride my horse. And so he came over and would ride with me, and he would saddle my horse for me. And I didn't know who he was because we didn't have there used to be a movie theater in our town, but that's famous. The Bobby Gentry song "Threw a Frog Down My Back" at the Carroll County Picture Show.
Oh, I don't think I realized that.
That's my hometown, and the picture show had closed long before I was born, but that is what I called movies, the picture show. And I remember Barbara Ling, the production designer Barbara Ling, and I was working with her on Fried Green Tomatoes, and I made a comment about, I said, I never went to a picture show until I was like 7 years old. And she said, "Stop the car. Did you just say picture show?" And I said, "Yeah, when I grew up, the only reference to motion picture was that we were the home of the Carroll County Picture Show, made famous in the song by Bobby Gentry. So I just always thought that a movie theater was a picture show." So,
I might have to add a little bit of the ode to Billy Joe under that story.
Yeah, Bobby, it was like the number one song in the nation for a while. But the Ode to Billy Joe, I think, is the name of the song. And the Carroll County Picture Show is in my hometown, Carroll.
What, before so this experience you had with the movie filming next to your grandmother's and meeting him, was that the inspiration for your desire to get into the business, or did you still have any idea later on you wanted to do something else?
I think that was the initial inspiration. For me, being that young, it was kind of the only time I ever really saw a profession, because I grew up in a farming community. And, everybody was farmers, or bankers or lawyers. So I probably went through the whole thing of banker, lawyer, farmer, filmmaker, because those were really kind of growing up at that young age would be the only three professions that I've really ever saw, and doctor. Mm-hmm. I think at one time I wanted to be a veterinarian, like every kid. Every kid that loves animals wants to be a veterinarian. But
sure.
But when I was about 10 years old, I really wanted a camera, and cameras were expensive, and I wanted a camera that had film. And a family that had been overseas with the military was moving back to the small town, and she was having a yard sale, and I found a little plastic 35 millimeter camera that she gave me. And nobody sold 35 millimeter film anywhere around us. So I ordered it from a Reader's Digest ad. And I shot 2 rolls of film, and I had no way of getting them developed. So I went to the local library and checked out every book on film developing. And I ordered a darkroom kit, and from Sears, I think. And I set up a darkroom in my parents' laundry room, which drove my mother insane because she could never get to the top of the laundry. And I started developing my own pictures at about 10 years old. And I moved I found a Super 8 camera at a yard sale, an estate sale, and I started developing that.
Oh, that's cool. I never, I did 35 millimeter, but I never developed Super 8 or 8 millimeter.
I tried, but it was hard, but I could do it in little snippets.
Mm-hmm.
But it was more into 35 millimeter film.
Sure.
And then once it became known I did that, I was always asked to be the yearbook photographer or, whatever. But it was more still photography that was in. I tried to do the Super 8 stuff, but that you couldn't get stuff developed, and the little stuff that I could figure out develop was never going to work. So I ventured off more into still photography and focused more on that at a pretty early age. started working for newspapers and the yearbooks, and did that through high school and through college. And then I was fortunate enough, a friend of mine named Kevin Ivey, who would eventually be on the first team that developed HD television, met him in college, and he had a student job with the USDA at the local extension service. And they had one more position to fill, and they told Kevin that he could fill it. And he asked me if I wanted to do it because he and I both had the same love of film and filmmaking. And so, gratefully to him, I scored one of the top positions, and probably one of the only positions in the state where you could actually learn filmmaking. And so I started with the Department of Economic. I started with the USDA Extension Service at Mississippi State my sophomore year of school, and we basically did all of the documentary type of news coverage for agriculture in the region. And when I say region, it would have been Mississippi, but we actually had the contract for the Tennessee Valley Authority. So I was able to start traveling at a pretty young age, operating a camera and doing a little bit of writing for that program. And then we covered all the sports. We shot all of the football and basketball and baseball games, which was great. And then did the television programs around the sports for the university. So that was fun. I don't really remember going to class much in college, but I remember spending a lot of time behind a camera and at an edit bay. I learned how to video edit at the time, the state-of-the-art Sony system. So my love of film and was really, I think the idea that I could get into the film industry came from having that student position with the Extension Service, because I began to be a complete filmmaker at that point, from, conceptualizing a story to writing it down to shooting it to editing it. And then we had a full audio booth. We had probably the largest full post-production house in the South at the time. And so I could score it, everything. And so I began really kind of getting a full rounded set of skills with that job. And then when I graduated, Kevin and I graduated at the same time, and they created 2 positions for us and kept us as full-time employees. So then he eventually left to go to CNN, and I stayed and continued in my position as I think I was an audio-visual specialist of some sort. But I was reading a newspaper article about the Mississippi Film Office, and they were looking for a scout. They were going to expand because it had come up that why did the state have a film office when there was really no movies being made in the state? So I wrote a letter to the director of the film office and told him that I literally knew the state through through a camera's eye, and that I really wanted the job. And they hired me almost immediately after getting the letter. And that threw me into filmmaking because I became a scout for the Mississippi Film Office. And my first client was Alan Parker for the movie Mississippi Burning.
It's such a good film, too. Wow.
Yeah. And I'd speak about that in the article, that Lydia Pilcher, who is an amazing filmmaker even today, she was the production supervisor, but she was the location scout for the show. And she would come in to Mississippi, and they just wanted to make the movie in Mississippi, They weren't, and so we literally went over the entire state. Took us several months or several weeks, and I really learned how to scout for a director, and kind of in a crash course with Lydia on Mississippi Burning. So, yeah, when I think about did I ever want to do anything else, I don't think I ever really did anything else because I started this so young. My first scouting job was with Everybody's All-American, and I was 19 years old. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, it was with the film office.
Right.
The film office would hire freelance scouts, and I got on a list with them, and I guess nobody else was available, and they paid me to go and scout for this.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so I was in college, I guess, when I did that first job, and then I didn't scout officially for a long time, mainly because I had the other job at the USDA and just didn't have time.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, I got on with the film office as the scout.
And then you eventually transitioned into management, but did you just do some independent scouting or scouting for movies before you actually started managing, or did they kind of go hand in hand at that time?
Well, I was the scout for the film office, and then we had the head of the film office was tapped to go be, I think he was the head of tourism for the new governor. And so for a period of time, I was the acting director of the Mississippi Film Office. And kind of in that role, I began to take on more administrative management position. I didn't like it because I really loved scouting, and I didn't like being in the office, and I had to hire somebody to do my position, which was the scout. And I just really didn't enjoy that as much. So after a while, they brought in a director for the film office, and I just realized that was not the kind of filmmaking I want. I didn't want to be a filmmaker who was a film office person at the time. I wanted to be on the grounds, nuts and bolts. So I called Lydia, who was doing a movie that I was scouting called Mississippi Masala. And I said, I think it's time for me to take the leap. And so I was given a job as an assistant manager for the movie Mississippi Masala. And that was really the first time where I was like a location assistant working set. I learned about porta potties and tables and, another part of the job that, when you're young and you're in your 20s, being able to burn off physical energy like that's a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing that. But
sure.
my love and my first love and will always be my love was the scouting, working with directors, working with production designers, reading a script and visualizing that, and then going to try to shoot that frame that is that vision in your head. That will always motivate me to do the work, is the fun of that. And the challenge of it and the motivation of it, that from beginning to end, even over managing today, managing, I enjoy logistics. I enjoy budgeting. I enjoy the challenge of taking a big idea that's very challenging on a lot of different levels and breaking it down into something that you can not only do, but afford. I enjoy that, but I nothing will ever replace that creative vision of scouting for me.
What was your favorite scouting experience? Do you have like a specific location that you're really proud of bringing to the table that kind of was, made the production work the way they had originally envisioned it, or maybe you brought them something that was different than what they had been looking for, but they fell in love with it?
There's a few, but one that stands out is the bee tree and fried green tomatoes.
Oh yeah,
yeah. That was a real challenging location, and that Barbara Ling is, to me, one of the most brilliant production designers I'll ever work with. And she had a very specific vision for that. And I spent hours and days and miles just riding back roads trying to find that. What we ended up shooting was almost a reverse vision of what she talked about.
And what was her pitch when she told you what she wanted you to find?
We wanted that idyllic big tree that just stuck out in the middle of a open expanse by itself. And right. But it couldn't be near, it had to be remote. It couldn't be near a highway, because you see a lot, people kind of create those things from time to time.
Sure.
But we
and no Google Earth or anything you could look from satellites and spot.
Earth, that was another fun thing about moving to Georgia was I'll finish answering this question. I'll go into the old way of doing things, but we ended up shooting a lot of what she originally said she needed and wanted. But I think what was so great about that was that we would get close and we would find almost close, and it was never, nope, this isn't going to work. And I would get really frustrated. And I just remember the day of riding down the road and looking out and seeing what would be the location, and just that feeling of knowing, oh my gosh, here it is. And oh my gosh, nothing else would have worked but this. And, just that whole understanding of the importance of having somebody push you to beyond the frustration of, I just want to get this off my plate because I've got so much else to do, and them just making you, and to a certain degree, I think trusting that I had the motivation to continue to get out there, because where we found that location and where it was so far off the beaten path that I would find it even hard today to find a scout that would go down that road. And and I think that, just how it pleased our director, and when you see it on film and you just know, that's great. And I kind of, with the same director, different production designer, a few years later, when I found the mines up in North Georgia, the marble mines, and we went up and filmed the movie The War with Kevin Costner up there.
Right.
The mine scenes in that were spectacular, and they were extremely hard to find, and it was just there was great satisfaction until we started in the feedback process of the film, when people said this, the cave and the mine scenes look fake. That's not really good art direction, because they look fake. Like, wow, that's as real as it gets. But very proud of that, because it was so cool. It was just such a cool experience. And of course, doing NASA will always be at the top of the list.
For Armageddon?
Yeah. And doing the oil rig, filming on the offshore oil rig for Armageddon will always stand at the top of the list. But I think just on so many shows, every show has, even the small ones, has its challenge, and there's I can't think of a show in which there isn't something that comes up that says, "Wow, this is special." But those are the ones that stick out. When you really get pushed by a production designer or a director to really do something spectacular, and then they show it as something spectacular. It's very gratifying. Just very gratifying.
Yeah, I did a show in Savannah that just came out on Amazon Prime, The Glorias. I was doing all the scouting for that before I ended up staying to help the actual filming. And I remember being on the tech scout and Julie Taymor was our director, and I was standing behind her, and we were looking at this little grocery store for the protest scene, which is supposed to be somewhere in the boroughs of New York. And here we are in Savannah finding these things. And the script supervisor walked up to her and was just shaking her head and said, when they said they were going to film this movie in Savannah and I read the script, I'm like, they're never going to be able to find these locations. But this is amazing. This looks wonderful. And Julie just turned and gave me the biggest hug. And it was like, now that's why the scouting is so rewarding.
Yeah.
When you can deliver exactly what she's been describing to you in the most unexpected place.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and managing does take you away a lot from that sort of circle of the director where, you really are for a very brief moment in time, and it passes. And by the time they get into production, it's like the location scout is who? But there's a very brief moment in time where you really contribute to someone's vision, and most of the time they're very appreciative of that effort and work. And I think that, like I said, it's not something that stays consistent necessarily through the whole experience of the movie, but it's I think once you kind of understand that you get this really incredible moment in time to be part of something really special. And just the nature of our business makes priorities really compartmental, meaning scouting is a priority for a finite period of time, and then other things become a priority, and so you quickly move out of that circle. You're like the focus of a lens. You quickly go into the blurred areas. But when the sharpness of the lens is on you and your job, it's really just the most amazing moment you can have, in my opinion, of any job. And I'm always, when you're younger, it's harder to understand that your job becomes part of the blurred vision of the lens at some point, metaphorically.
Mm-hmm.
But as you get older and you realize that you have this very pinnacle moment to be a part of something really great and to integrate your talent and your passion into it, and it's going to go away, then it becomes a little more valuable, a little more motivating. And then it's very easy now to let it go. It's like, okay, they're going to make the movie, and the director's going to see me in the hallway and not know who I am, whereas, I was his most favorite person 5 weeks ago. But,
right.
But, but that's part of it. And it's, I still get goosebumps talking about it. I still really love it. I don't, like I said, in the article, I think, there's more of my career behind me than in front of me. And I'm just so fortunate that I was able to be in this long enough to have an appreciation of those moments when that clarity of what I was doing was really important and valued. And, it's not how, and then I move on to helping producers, directors, and the studios figure it out how to do it, how to get it done on a budget, how to get it done on a timeline. And those things have their gratifying moments as well, but nothing quite as helping a production designer and a director marry their vision. There's just nothing better than that.
Is there a specific production designer or show that the relationship you had and the experience you had was particularly special, that you really, when you think about all the things you've done? You've done a lot of bigger movies lately and several for Disney most recently. Mm-hmm. But is there one particular production experience that really still stands out to you, or do you have a newer one that kind of replaces one of the older, or is everyone kind of its own thing?
I always harken back to the beginnings of my career, because I kind of knew that I'd probably be having the best of my career then. But every job right now, I feel like I end up with I loved Man from Toronto, even though I didn't get to finish it. I was working with Naomi Shohan, who is she's just brilliant, mm-hmm. and pushes you, I'm getting more into action adventure movies. It's fun to watch to watch somebody really think through, a fight scene or that has explosions and stunts. And, I did graduate into those multi-layered movies with multi-layered units that are layering in stunts and special effects. And to be honest with you, there's so much going on in that process that I don't think you pull your head out and really just kind of understand your moment in it, because it is so collaborative and it is so organizational collaboration. But I do enjoy it. I enjoy it very much, but in a different way. I would say there in the bigger movies, I really sort of enjoy the huge collaboration and this huge big cog of these wheels that kind of get involved with the smaller cog of the wheels. But yeah, I do. I do like the art direction and the bigger movies. Going out to New Mexico and going to the Navajo Nation and filming Shiprock, which is this amazing piece of territory, or going down into Savannah and going down into some of the true historical areas and figuring out how to get those filmed. It's different than going and finding a bee tree in a field.
Right.
I mean, there's a different motivation. There's a different energy. But can I pinpoint one specific set or one specific moment? No. I mean, I'm sure there is.
Yeah, everyone is rewarding in its own right, and I just was curious because it's so. I think the bee tree is a great example of a scouting challenge that you solve, and then the reward you get for that after the fact, and the feeling you get. I mean, it seems like everybody has a tree. I was talking to Kakai, and he's telling me about finding their team looking for the tree for Shawshank. I'm talking to Mike Riley, and he's talking about finding the farmhouse and how they ended up in Sonoya, and Maida telling us there used to be a farmhouse on this road. It's there somewhere. Go find that farmhouse. And then realizing it had been moved, but it took a lot of extra effort to go figure out where that farmhouse was and would it still work for what they were doing. And so those kind of challenges that we get as scouts before we get into the logistics really are kind of some of the fun puzzle pieces that we have to help put together before we can actually go put the logistics together.
Yeah. I mean, it's like Ilt Jones called me a few years ago, and he was like, I'm having really hard time finding this location. And I said, well, send me a picture. And he sent me a picture, and I looked at it, and I said, I know where that is. I've seen that. But I think I even said, I've seen this. It's here. But I can't think about where it is. And for years and years and years, I had gone out to Browns Lake to fish. And in South Fulton County, and then it closed down, and it had gotten sold, and all of that land had been sold. And I had never really tried to get on it since it had been sold. And I went out there just driving around, and it had turned into the Chattahoochee Hills Event Center, Bucart Farms.
Oh,
and
okay.
I had known Bucart Farms when it was owned by another family. And so I had gone out and met Hugh and said, I want to make a movie out here. And we had gone out and done a little piece of a movie there. And I wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm going, gosh, that hill that Ilt is looking for, it's on Bucart Farms. So I said, I bet you I have a picture of it someplace. So I went back through my file photos, and I found a couple of pictures, and I sent them to to like 6:00 in the morning. I said, "Is this what you're looking for?" And he like immediately shot back. He goes, "Where is this?" and then they ended up making a lot of Black Panther out at Bucart. And
oh, right.
And so, I think that's another gratifying thing, that locations people tend to be very protective of their work and their connections and their locations. And I have to admit that there have been times that I felt that way. But it's been the times when I got a phone call from another location manager asking me, "Hey, do you know where this is? Or do you know where this is? Or can I pick your brains about that?" And then seeing something really contribute greatly to something of their work. That's been fun. That's been a lot of fun. When I think about some of the newer stuff that I've done, Atlanta has changed so much over the years. Mm-hmm. And so much of the great locations that were around, they're gone. Right? Pullman Yard was great. I probably was one of the first people to film at Pullman Yard back in the 90s. And it was still an operational yard. It was still being used for what it was built for. And it's been very sad to see it kind of go the way it went. But no, when I think about the more recent stuff, maybe I've become a little more jaded, or maybe that those feelings don't really come out as much because I've got so much on my mind now with managing, and I don't scout near as much. I'll scout the first 2 or 3 weeks of a show to get a production designer and a director familiar with the town or the area. But really being able to go out and roll up my sleeves and do the nuts and bolts of finding things, I don't do that near as much. But I will say that I filmed the Disney movie Safety up at Clemson University last year. And we actually filmed during a Clemson University actual football game. And the amount of logistics and work and effort that went into doing that, filming the number one football team in the nation in the preseason and as it's getting ready and at a game, was a monumental task. And it went off without a hitch. I would love to say I was a big part of that, but the collaboration, we had an amazing first AD. We had an amazing producer. We had an amazing line producer. We had an amazing UPM. When you begin to understand that you can't truly have a spectacular success as a manager or as a department unless you have big elements like that in place, and that's so unique and rare, that kind of takes the singular pinpoint of what you do in a certain movie. It kind of, I wouldn't say diminishes it, but that it's suddenly when the bigger part of your job is more of a collaboration, those become the things that you remember more. And, shooting Lady and the Tramp down in Savannah, and just some of the things that we were able to accomplish shooting a period film in October, the biggest tourist month in in Savannah. And, but there again, the collaboration of the city and the collaboration of the rigging grips and the rigging gaffers, those become the kind of as the things that I take away from more than the singular thing of, I brought that particular thing to that frame. It's different. But
those are funny little stories that pop up in every production, but it is the big picture that really makes it ultimately so rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's never, it'll never be lost on me to go see a huge, frame of a scout frame of a picture that I've shot during scouting, and actually see that frame show up in the theaters on the screen.
Yeah.
That's special. And that to me is what carries you through it all.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the reasons we started doing the podcast was, we over my short career compared to many of the other people I've worked with. And I think I've mentioned your name so many times during the course of all these interviews. And for those that don't know, I was very lucky to get to work with Maida on several of my first projects. She's been one of my key mentors and, taught me a lot that I apply every day in the job that I continue to do. Even though our last project that we had the opportunity to work together on was Prisoners, I learned so much working with you. And I thank you for the experience you gave me and the opportunities you gave me at that time.
Aww.
And you think of the challenges, and it's little things too. It's not necessarily just finding the bee tree. I can't tell you how many times people have realized I worked on Prisoners and have immediately turned to me and go, "What's Deacons like?"
Brilliant. Yeah.
How's that working with him?
Yeah.
And you think of the little things that you had to pull off to get what that film looked like.
Yeah. And I that reminds me of a great story from Prisoners where Roger had this vision where we're doing the foot chase scene.
Mm-hmm.
And there was literally another neighborhood. We had a neighborhood locked down, but there was another neighborhood across a gully that had streetlights in it. And he literally had to have like one light and then another 100 feet, another light just in a certain position. And he's so incredible in that he will draw you an animated picture of it, of what he's looking at. So you don't have to get in his mind to understand what he's going for. He'll draw it for you. And he would draw these beautiful booklets of his lighting where he wanted his lights. And it was some of the toughest location work I've ever done to literally go find lighting placements for him. Mm-hmm. But I used to say, I said, "Roger, you have me painting the dark." And he would laugh. But that's what he does. He paints the dark. And he does it so brilliantly because these light, he wasn't blowing anything out with light. It was literally like a speck of light, 200, 300 feet, or maybe even 100 yards in the background. And as a moviegoer, and as somebody's just going to sit there and watch that, it probably has an amazing mental effect on you that you can't identify. But as a filmmaker who is part of that process of helping him get that, it pops to you. It's like, oh my gosh, that's gorgeous. How this was so painful to get done. This was to talk to these people and to get the lighting company down in there and to, everything that it took, and not, and to try and to make sure you could borrow from Peter to pay Paul in your budget to get that shot that was 3 seconds, but it's so worth it. I mean, and those are thank you. Cause that I remember that story very vividly because I remember seeing that particular frame, and it was literally seconds on the screen, but it was beautiful, and it was beautiful in the most subtle of ways. And, that was very satisfying, very satisfying.
There were so many subtle things like that on that project for sure.
Yeah. And, and I always forget this, but the beach at Jekyll that I did for X-Men probably is the biggest, most complicated, location I've ever done. And the restoration of it was, Fox made a commitment to do a restoration that basically took a very damaged piece of land that had been damaged for years and years and years, and actually restore it to where it was like maybe 1,000 years ago. And to be a part of that process, and that was a huge set. And it I found a whole new product in Maybe mats, where we actually built an acre of mats on a beach and literally pulled them up, and there were flowers growing under the mats. And we had
Oh, wow.
full production vans full of equipment parked on these mats. And so, I don't know why I forget about the beach at Jekyll, but when you talk about something more recent, even though that was 10 years ago, just the involvement and all of the particulars of that, from an environmental standpoint of, there were turtles and birds and special grasses and, just the education that I got in environmental stewardship and taking care of that beach was, and then to go down and see it now and to just see this glorious beach that didn't exist before us and now does, which is, that's incredibly gratifying.
We've got a lot of people that think they want to be in the film industry, and they automatically start talking about directing and production. And so many that we've talked to had the same thought and found their way into locations. How do you describe the job of location management to someone that is interested in getting into the industry, but really doesn't understand what locations do? What's your elevator pitch for somebody that you think would be a good locations person?
It literally is the culmination of every single job in the film business. We are.
That's a great way to put it.
We are one of the few production departments that we contribute on a creative level. We have direct access to the creatives, from the director and the production designer, and sometimes writers, but not nearly as much. But I would say that's when you say the creatives, maybe we don't deal with the writers as much, although I have worked with writers from time to time. But you get to have a significant contribution to the creative vision, and then you are beholding to the studio to help get the vision to the screen in a logistically efficient and budgetarily way. And so I take great pride in that. My job is to help a UPM and a line producer, get the stress out of their job of how we're going to make this happen. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to come up with a plan, and I'm going to go cost it out, and I'm going to figure it out for you. That's just fun. It's just plain out fun. I've never wanted to be anything but a location scout and a manager. So it'd be hard for me to say, well, you may not want to be a UPM, you may want to be a location manager, or you may not want to be a director, you may want to be a location manager, because I've never wanted to be anything but a location manager. Mm-hmm. I was trained by some really great ones, and I got a great sense of self-worth and gratification very young by being one. So it was always great love for me. And I'm not going to lie that I love the freedom of it. Mm-hmm. You have you really, to some degree, you're always beholden to something, but you do have a tremendous amount of freedom to independently think and bring that to the table to either be accepted with let's work on it, or say this is not going to work. But you have that freedom. And I don't think there's very many jobs in this business that give you that, and that give you the breadth of what this does. I mean, you have to be multi-talented, and you have to be able to multitask, and you have to, for lack of a better word, be a type A, because you have to have a tremendous amount of energy to just literally take the ping pong. I mean, you're literally on a tennis court with the ball machine on fast. And from the time you say yes to a job to the day you wrap it up and end. I mean, we're so important in the beginning of a show, but by the end of a show, we are not important. So they want to get rid of you as quickly as possible. So you literally are huffing and puffing, because you might need 3 or 4 weeks to wrap a show, but they want you gone in a week.
Yeah.
So, you know, at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing that I learned is that this is a business, and this is a business that operates on margin. And as creative and as fun and as much of a commitment that it demands from you on a personal level, at the end of the day, it's a business. And you have to respect that. You have to respect everybody above you making a business decision. It's not personal. You have to respect that the studio needs you to operate as a business person, not as your personal hobby. So I think that that's always been helpful for me. That, you know, just take the fun from this business when they give it, but always remember that it's a business, and it's a business that operates on margin, which means budget and efficiency and all of that. While it can be terribly painful in the moment, it's just part of what it is.
Maida, I can't thank you enough, and not only for making time to be on the podcast, but thanks for everything you taught me and for being patient with me when I didn't know anything. And because I came from another environment where I thought I already knew everything, taught me what I didn't know and turned me into a better locations person. I wouldn't be as successful as I have been if it weren't for what I learned with you, and for you being hard on me when I didn't know what I was doing and helping me understand what I was doing wrong as well as what I was doing right. That was equally as important. And I just want to say thank you again for making time to share your information on this, but also to share your knowledge and experiences with me personally.
Well, thank you, Dodd. I appreciate all that you've done, and particularly how you've come to love the job, and not only love it, but promote it, just like with this podcast. But, you know, you truly have all of those elements that I say that I look for in a person that I want to work with. And I greatly appreciate you. And I feel fortunate that somebody drove down your mother's driveway and we said, hey, hire that guy. So and Taylor and all and your whole family have come into the business and have been a great asset. I appreciate that.
This is Dodd Vickers, your host for Locations on 2. You can find me online at doddvickers.com. Locations on 2 can be found anywhere you get your other favorite podcasts, or by visiting us online at locationson2.com. Locations on 2 is brought to you by the Location Managers Guild International. Visit us online for more information about our upcoming award show and the virtual brunch that'll be hosted the weekend before. You can find out more at locationmanagers.org. Until next time, it's back to one.